There is a lot of philosophy on YouTube, and a lot of it is well written, entertaining, and smart. But how much of it is actually any good? What are the challenges and advantages of doing or getting your philosophy on YouTube? And can philosophy on YouTube make deep and meaningful contributions to philosophical thought? Or will it always be an inferior version of the real thing? Well, those are just some of the questions I want to address in this video. So keep watching, because I have all the answers and you can definitely trust me. To begin with, let's talk about the difference between YouTube philosophy and academic philosophy. One important difference is that the latter is usually done by full-time professionals who undergo years of rigorous training and evaluation, gaining deep knowledge in their area of expertise. Compared to that, YouTube philosophy might look like the Bush Leagues. It has no barrier to entry, so there's no guarantee that someone uploading a video on some topic has any relevant knowledge or training at all. Now, YouTube philosophy clearly has some strengths, like being entertaining, personal, snappy, and easily accessible. These characteristics all contribute to the popularity of philosophy on YouTube, which is a good thing, because if there is anything of value in academic philosophy, then it should be communicated to a wider audience. Also, if you're considering getting into academic philosophy as a career, then YouTube could be a good introduction, letting you know what's out there and providing some direction. So maybe in a time when philosophy departments are losing funding or being closed down, YouTube could help revitalize the field. So those are some reasons why philosophy on YouTube might be subordinate to actual philosophy, valuable as a way of engaging with a wider audience, but ultimately just an inferior version of the real thing. However, there are also reasons to think that YouTube philosophy could actually be counterproductive to good philosophy. YouTube rewards success according to the metrics of YouTube, which promote immediate engagement and persistent distraction. As a result, the system favors content that is shallow, shocking, or flattering to viewers, all at the expense of substance, accuracy, and clarity. As Adorno and Horkheimer argued, the incentives of mass entertainment and consumption create a culture industry that produces and promotes satisfying distractions for an increasingly passive audience. And to be clear, none of this requires conscious cynicism on the part of YouTube creators. It's just that once you get exposed to the analytics, the performance metrics, the engagement numbers, it's really hard not to respond to them. So YouTubers start to make decisions based on what they think will please audiences, or the algorithm, or a confused combination of both, and slowly transform themselves into the product that YouTube can most effectively sell to advertisers. And those who don't, well, they just sink beneath the waves, never to be seen again. This is what philosopher C.Tai Nguyen calls the gamification of discourse, where the rich and complex values of constructive communication get swapped for the flat, simple values of an online media platform. Someone might get started on YouTube with starry-eyed ideals of philosophical investigation or education, but pretty soon they start to confuse these goals with click-through rates and watch times. And eventually, just to avoid being confusing, difficult, or boring, they're skipping over any complexity and nuance with a quick edit, a tone of voice, or a joke. The risk here is not in doing substandard or bad philosophy, but in doing negative philosophy, actively harming their audience's ability to gain real understanding by stifling their curiosity with quick and easy answers. I think you can really see all of this at work in the philosophy as therapy genre, where ideas and theories are treated like a medicine cabinet that people can dip into to feel better about their lives. This isn't exactly bad. The idea of philosophy as a kind of therapy has been popular throughout history, from Epicurus to Boethius to Wittgenstein. And obviously, philosophy is and should be relevant to our lives, because life is full of problems which prompt philosophical questions. However, treating philosophy as something which we use to dispel life's problems is to treat those problems as an aberration, as separate from life, when they are perhaps the most important parts of it. So not only does philosophy as therapy trivialize philosophy, it trivializes life as well. Like many practices, philosophy can be harder than it seems, and the extent of that difficulty can lie beyond what we can imagine. Confusing mysteries, uncomfortable challenges, and the occasional hard truth might be all that philosophy has for us, because most of the time, that's just what life is like. So while tackling problems with nuance and complexity can be frustrating and unsatisfying, it could also be a sign that you're doing things right. And we should be wary of answers that simply make us feel good, because we can confuse that feeling with the feeling of understanding or being right. Given its popularity, philosophy as therapy has clearly found a home on YouTube. My guess is that by giving easy and comforting answers, it's just a more algorithm-friendly way of presenting philosophical ideas. So that's what people are driven to produce. Okay, that was all a pretty negative take on YouTube philosophy, and it may all be true. But why should we think that all this puts YouTube philosophy at a substantial disadvantage to academic philosophy? After all, some of the greatest work in philosophy was done outside of the university, and present-day academic philosophers are subject to an increasingly strong set of pressures that distort and constrain their work. Just as YouTubers are pressured by the standards of YouTube, so academics are pressured by the standards of university administrators, journals, and other gatekeepers to pursue engagement, impact, prestige, speed, and quantity in their publications. On top of that, professional requirements lead them to produce work that most people cannot understand, appreciate, or even access. YouTube offers a way around all of this, and many content creators in the YouTube philosophy space are in fact professional academics as well. YouTube just gives them a platform to reach more people in a more democratic and equitable way. As for the supposed inferiority of YouTube as a medium, we should also remember that the history of philosophy already incorporates a wide range of genres and mediums, like poems, dialogues, stories, theater, novels, and so on, all with their own limitations and strengths. So why not YouTube, with all of its quirks and pitfalls as well? So let's be optimistic and think about what it would mean for YouTube to produce its own kind of philosophy, not by conforming to the standards of academic philosophy, but rather by contributing to philosophical thought more generally, and in a way that is characteristic of YouTube as a medium. To begin with, this would have to be more than philosophy that simply appears on YouTube, like a recorded lecture or an explanation with pictures. Even if something like that contained novel and important philosophical work, it wouldn't really count, because the medium itself, that is, YouTube, wouldn't be contributing anything to the philosophy part. YouTube could definitely contribute to the transmission and engagement, but those aren't philosophical contributions, because something like a lecture uploaded to YouTube could just be recreated elsewhere, maybe in text form or even live, and the philosophical part would remain unchanged. All of this raises a problem. If you did find a way to do philosophy that is unique to YouTube, then how would you be able to explain or communicate it outside of YouTube? If you could just transfer the work to another medium like text or speech, then what was so special about it being done on YouTube in the first place? And if it is so unique to YouTube that it can't be communicated in any other way, then what good is it? Also, a true work of YouTube philosophy might have to do more than just illustrate, summarize, or otherwise communicate something philosophical. It would actually have to do philosophy. But what does that mean? Well, the philosopher Aaron Smuts proposes a pretty simple standard for what it means to do philosophy within a particular medium. For him, doing philosophy is just offering reasons to believe something in a way that is characteristic of that medium. Smuts' own example is the use of montage to make an argument by analogy in Sergei Eisenstein's film, October, 10 Days That Shook the World. So what would the equivalent be for YouTube to make a philosophical contribution? What would a distinctly YouTube-ish work of philosophy even look or sound like? More importantly, what characterizes YouTube as a medium? In other words, what is distinctive or unique about YouTube that it could make its own contribution to doing philosophy, and in a way that couldn't just be recreated in another medium without significant changes? Maybe the key to understanding and appreciating the value of YouTube philosophy is to stop trying to compare it to everything else. Let it exist for its own sake and do things in its own way. Hopefully, as it evolves, it will start to develop a way of doing things that we can then recognize, analyze, and evaluate. In the meantime, perhaps watching YouTubers try and fail at philosophy helps us to think more carefully about things and develop our own interests and skills. In that case, the value isn't just in what people are producing and transmitting to viewers, but rather in the process of trying to understand what we're doing and what on earth we're talking about. For either of these purposes, YouTube philosophy wouldn't have to be high quality or even that unique. It just has to be challenging and risky, avoiding the temptations of cheap entertainment and easy answers.